The views and opinions expressed by the hosts of this podcast are those of the individual and not of any affiliated companies. Occasional adult language is used.
Welcome to the ShamTalk podcast, the #1 Notre Dame athletics podcast in the world. Today, the guys talk about the team's loss against Ohio State and how they can bounce back this weekend against Duke. And now, from Duncan Student Center, here's your host, Tyler Reidy.
The intro in later?
Yep.
All right, cool. All right, here we go. All right, 3, 2, 1. Welcome back to the ShamTalk podcast, our second in-season edition with JJ Post. My name's Tyler Reidy. JJ, great to be back with you for this week. Unfortunately, you look back at this weekend, we didn't get a lot of sleep. Lost a lot of sleep, and Notre Dame unfortunately lost to Ohio State here at home. It was a fantastic college football game, fantastic environment, but ultimately a 17-14 loss.
Yeah, I'd be lying if I say my sleep schedule is recovered from the 45-hour plus stretch of time awake that went from Friday to Saturday. We're working back to it, but it's not all the way there yet. I mean, the game is just... I think I said this during the game. At first, I kind of thought maybe I was overreacting. But I'm like, I decided I wasn't. I said in the middle of the fourth quarter, or rather right after the fourth quarter, why couldn't they have just shut us out? And at the time, I'm like, okay, maybe that's a little dramatic. You know, we still came back. It says a lot about the team that we fought our way back in. But you do have to imagine the loss would be, perhaps a little more palatable if it was just a, 10-0 loss. We didn't play it well enough. We got beat by the better team. No, we came back in the game. We established ourselves in the second half as probably the better team, and it just wasn't enough because in the final, however many plays in that last drive, Ohio State won the drive, and they won the game. It's just it's a frustrating result to take because that's football. You play well for 59 minutes, and then for that final minute, you collapse, and you lose the game, and, there's Notre Dame doesn't have anyone to blame but themselves. That's the thing, A lot of these games you can talk about the refs, and, there's never going to be a game where everyone is happy with what the refs did. A lot of these games, you can talk about, the other team maybe having a really good game. And Ohio State didn't play badly, but, it wasn't the sort of game where you can be like, well, we could never have beat Ohio State. No, Notre Dame should have beat Ohio State on that day. They only have themselves to blame, a bunch of tiny mistakes. And I think that's going to be the story of the day, maybe. And we'll see if that's the story of the season. But Notre Dame still has time to regroup and make sure it's not what ends up being the story of the season. Yeah, we'll get into a lot more of the X's and O's in just a moment, but first let's talk about the positives, and that mainly is the environment surrounding the game. What a weekend, a once-in-a-generation type of weekend here on campus in South Bend, starting with the Pat McAfee show coming in Friday afternoon, college game day, of course, Saturday morning with Irish fans really showing out. Many of them sleeping on library lawn, ourselves included, Friday night heading into Saturday. The flyover before the game, the green out, the LED wristbands lighting up on third downs and big moments throughout the night. It was a raucous environment here at Notre Dame and a ton of fun to be a part of. Yeah, I mean, this was an environment of a football school that remembered it was a football school. I mean, on some level, too, it's, it says, something very negative about Notre Dame that we even have to talk about it this way. That was kind of a surprise that for a game like this, it was like, had an atmosphere like this. But it was very much the part of a top game atmosphere. There was I think kind of a moment, heading into the game where like you saw, if you were there, I don't know when you entered the stadium, but I was there when the gates opened, and there was a decent amount of red, at least in the early entries, and you're wondering like, hey, for all this hype about Notre Dame's got this special plan for make this a really good night, is it going to come through? It was looked maybe for a moment there like Ohio State was going to maybe not take it over, but maybe be a bit more than Cincy too. That didn't happen. It was mostly green in the stands, and the crowd was into it. I mean, that first snap, it was as loud as I've heard Notre Dame Stadium ever, and it wasn't especially close. Even games like Clemson last year, big game, and the crowd was ready to go, but it wasn't an atmosphere like that. And I think the big indicator of this is like I said, I went in like 2 hours early when the gates opened. Against Clemson, I did the same thing. I was the only one in line. I walked in and sat down, and I was the only one in there. Against Ohio State, I was not the first one in line, and the line, in fact, when the gates did open, had actually stretched outside the concourse. The senior section was basically entirely full once the gates opened. I think that speaks to, I don't know if there was maybe just a certain more amount of enthusiasm because Ohio State is a regional team. I don't know what the reason is that, for this game, turnout really spiked, at least in terms of the early entries. But this was a game that everyone very clearly, wanted to see. And Notre Dame gave them a show, at least in terms of the off-field atmosphere. They made the, I like that they varied out the third down song. I think that was a change that needed to happen that they made. The LED lights were great. The flyover was great. In terms of the spectacle, Notre Dame, and this has been a knock on Notre Dame for a while, made it seem like a game worthy of being a top 10 showdown. And, I think we've had games like that at Notre Dame Stadium in the past where, the game itself was good, but you came away thinking this isn't the best Notre Dame Stadium has to offer. That was the best Notre Dame Stadium had to offer, and it was really, really good.
Yeah, and to start getting into the X's and O's, really the nitty-gritty of this ball game, Notre Dame's defense was phenomenal for the most part up until that final drive, which we'll discuss in length in just a moment. Ohio State, coming in to Saturday night's game, had scored at least 20 points in 77 consecutive games, and we knew that the offense was full of firepower. The wide receiver core is tremendous now. Emeka Egbuka had a great game for the Buckeyes, 7 catches for 96 yards, but Notre Dame shut down the elephant in the room, Marvin Harrison Jr., 3 catches, 32 yards, a big drop-off from his production coming into the weekend. Benjamin Morrison continues to prove himself as one of the top, if not the best corner within college football. So Notre Dame's defense was phenomenal. The offense took a while to get going. Shut out in the first half. Audric Estime was slow out of the gate, only 3 yards on his first 4 carries. He eventually ran for 70. I thought Jeremiah Love and Jadarian Price combining for 79 yards on 11 carries really showcased the depth of Notre Dame. And it just seemed overall, however, that Estime's inability to get going early led to these 4th and 1 situations in the first half where Notre Dame felt like, well, can we really turn to our bell cow in these spots? And usually, even when things aren't necessarily going right, you can say yes, but Notre Dame decided to put the ball in Sam Hartman's hands on both of those 4th and 1s in the first half, also missing a field goal on a 4th down, 47-yarder. But on those 4th and 1s, Sam Hartman did a play-action run to the outside, couldn't pick up the first down, also tried to sneak on one later on, bounced it outside, ran into a wall. So, Notre Dame's running game, in hindsight, was pretty good, but it didn't necessarily have the feel of a Clemson game like last year where the Irish are just running it down your throat and mauling the opposition from the get-go. And at least for me, I think that provides a lot of the basis and the reasoning as to why the Irish couldn't come through on those early game situations on 4th and 1.
Yeah, I think the running game is kind of a tale of stopping and starting in the sense that, in a lot of areas, I'd say this is probably Notre Dame's, I wouldn't say their best running game of the season, but I think it was the one that if you had told Dalen McCullough at the start of the season, this is what an average game from your running back room would look like, he would have taken it. Audric Estime doesn't take too much of the workload. Your 2 younger backs in J.D. Price and Jeremiah Love both make serious contributions. Jabran Payne is, I don't think anyone expects this. I think you can fairly comfortably say Jabran Payne is the best short yardage back on the team. Audric Estime has the strength, but Jabran Payne, I don't know the mechanics of this. I'm not a running back coach. He has an ability to get low with his body on these third, in short situations. I don't think he's been stuffed yet. Even that, weird Wildcat set they ran to get the first touchdown. He was stopped stone cold in the backfield, and he fought his way in. And, there's been a couple of games like that, when facing 3rd and 3, 4th and 2, whatever you want to call it, where Notre Dame, takes Estime off the field, puts in Payne, and Payne's the one that kind of, he's never going to bowl over a defender down, but he has an ability to keep his legs churning and win the leverage battle and win the situations. But back to the original point, it's just interesting to think about because, again, if you told Dalen McCullough at the start of the season that, in the biggest game of the year, Estime would rush for 70 yards and not have to carry the ball every time, he would get, more than 7 yards per carry out of Love and Price, and Jabran Payne would score a touchdown, he would have taken that every time. And, for the second half at least, it was an effective attack. But I don't disagree. I think the inability to maybe use Estime in just an every down role, and it's good for Estime too, because you don't want to overwork your running back. It is very easy to give your running back 1 billion carries and have them wear out by week 7. And Notre Dame doesn't want to do that. They've been very intentional about not doing that. But in a game like this, where it felt like maybe Notre Dame was kind of trying to still figure out which one of their running backs they wanted on the field on that last drive, and not because any of them. That's kind of the problem is almost there were too many weapons. It wasn't because Notre Dame didn't know which running back would be the one they trusted in that situation. It's because they trusted too many of them, so to speak. They knew Estime could be good. They wanted to get Love touches because Love was performing well. Payne's a really good situational guy. And it felt like on that last drive, they maybe tried to overthink it because they wanted to get Love some touches. I believe it was Love on the field when there was that miscommunication that led to a 5-yard loss on the handoff, which then set up the failed screen. Again, it's just a weird game to evaluate because in the first half, the run game was, I'd say, effective but not good. In the second half, it was really good until the last drive when it just kind of, the thing is, on the draft, it wasn't even bad in the last drive, too. There was just one play that lost you 5 yards, and then the entire drive got derailed from there because Notre Dame then tried to get too cute with a screen, and then by then it was just a garbage time run to try to, eat up a little more clock. It's just a really weird game for the running backs all around. I don't know if there's anything you could, fix per se heading into next game, because, it's not like, again, it's not like Estime, Love, Payne, or Price. Any of them played badly. They all played good. It's just the failure to find the correct balance in every phase of the game, is something that I don't know if there's going to be a right answer for Notre Dame, because when you have 4 talented backs, you're going to want to make sure all of them get touches. And in a game like this, you can't spend so much energy trying to figure out when is the right time to get all 4 of your backs touches.
Yeah, we'll hit on this for just a moment and then get to the long-term implications of the Notre Dame-Ohio State game, but the lack of execution down the stretch. Notre Dame, in the second half, did what it could not do in Columbus last season, which is get back up after falling behind and provide a spark late in the game and erase a 10-0 deficit. Last year it was a 21-10 deficit on the road. This year it was 10-0. Irish had back-to-back methodical touchdown drives to take that 14-10 lead and got the football back after a huge 4th-and-1 stop in their own red zone. Irish pick up a couple first downs. They're potentially 1 away from icing the game, but as you said, kind of a botched handoff play that turned into a loss of 5 on a Sam Hartman read option, then a screen pass that was batted down to stop the clock when Ohio State had just 1 timeout left. Then you take a 5-yard penalty before punting the football away. Buckeyes take it back, and they're driving a little bit, but as soon as Ohio State gets into the red zone, they take that intentional grounding penalty to set up a 3rd and 19. And there's only 15 seconds left. OSU has already had to burn its timeout to avoid a 10-second runoff. So now Notre Dame's facing a situation where you've just got to keep the play in front of you, keep Ohio State out of the end zone, and keep them from picking up the first down on this 3rd and 19, and you're in position to have 1 play to win the game. But the Buckeyes pick up a 21-yard gain on an Emeka Egbuka catch that gets the first down, stops the clock at the 1. They spike it, throw an incompletion, run the ball in, and on those last 2 plays, which both followed Ohio State incompletions, not hurry-up situations, Notre Dame had only 10 players out on the field. So as we walked away from this game, at least from my perspective, it was a whole pileup of grievances. First, you're upset with the 3rd and 19 conversion. Then you realize the lack of execution on the final offensive drive. And then you see the tweets after the game, and there's 10 players out on the field in the last moment.
Yeah, I mean, the 10 players out on the field is like the most egregious one, so it's going to be the one that gets all the attention. The 3rd and 19, I think, is the one that's really going to maybe stick in my nightmares for the next few years, because that was, I don't know what they were trying to do, and I think that's maybe the biggest, grievance of all. Like the screen pass, for example, in hindsight, you don't pass on 2nd down. But, when you also look back, you can see that, if they're just able to float it over, they have a massive gain. Price had, I think a 2-on-1 with 2 blockers, 1 defender in front of him. He had the sideline. He was going to get the first down and then some. So that one you can kind of look back on and be like, okay, obviously you don't want to do that because stop the clock. But also, if it worked, there was going to be massive upside. On the 3rd and 19, I'm just not sure what they were going for. They only rushed 3 in a drive in which maybe your biggest successes had come when you were able to make McCord face pressure. So you're only rushing 3. And it feels like they didn't have a specific plan for how they wanted to stop Egbuka. It felt like they were just trying to, I don't think they were trying to reinvent the wheel per se, but it felt like they went out there with kind of like a, just don't let them get to the goal line. Don't let them get to the first down stick. And there's a saying, the only thing prevent coverage does is prevent you from winning. I don't think that was prevent coverage per se, but I do think kind of the mentality of, okay, it's a 3rd and long, let's make sure they don't get to the sticks, kind of led to the defense as a whole softening up and giving them that cushion. And Ohio State's offense, when you only rush 3, they don't need to, you can give them as much space as you want. They'll find the opening. Kyle McCord is not going to be probably a top 5 pick, but he's not a bad quarterback either. If you only rush 3, if you give him time to see the field and don't put a hand in his face, he's going to find the right option. Buka just shot right down, straight down Broadway and could have been a touchdown right then and there. Again, the 10 men on the field is inexcusable, and, that's the most glaring instance of lack of execution. Again, the screen, in hindsight, looks bad, but, maybe justifiable when you see what it could have been. The 3rd and 19, I don't think there's any defense for it.
No question. Now, last thing before we move on to Duke, Notre Dame's playoff implications. We can all agree that if ND wins this game against Ohio State, things are looking pretty as heck, pretty as it can be. Irish are 5-0. They've got a top 10 victory, and they're firmly positioned to even have a little bit of wiggle room and potentially make the playoff. But now things get tough. And from the middle of August, I've been comparing the layout of this schedule to the 2017 season. You look back to 2017, Notre Dame started unranked, coming off the 4-8 year, lost by 1 point to what was ultimately a college football playoff runner-up in Georgia at home in week 2. Irish fell back to unranked. Remember that in this instance, Irish are falling back to number 11 after the OSU loss. But then that 2017 team went on a run. They blew out a USC team that was top 15 at home, blew out a ranked NC State team at home. Remember, Josh Adams was having all those long runs, and then Notre Dame got back to number 3 at the beginning of November in that season, went down to Miami, and we know what happened next. The 41-8 loss, one of the worst in modern program history. So here we are. Notre Dame has just lost on the last second by a matter of inches, by a matter of one singular player potentially, to Ohio State at home, a playoff contender universally across college football here. Now Notre Dame's got opportunities. You can go on the road to Duke this weekend, which we'll get to in a moment, and take care of business. You can beat USC, which could be a top 4 team by the time you get to October 14th at home. And, of course, there's the trip to Clemson. We still have no idea what Clemson really is, but it's at Clemson. It's a night game. It's always dangerous. So Notre Dame's got opportunities in front of it. There's no question that the route is there, but it did get a lot tougher.
Yeah, I think the good news is this schedule, or rather, this pathway for Notre Dame to make the playoff it's a host unto itself, so to speak. Because if Notre Dame wins out, which is what they'll obviously have to do, that automatically means they will get a head-to-head win over USC, presumably one of the teams that is in contention. If Ohio State wins out, which is presumably what would also need to happen, that means they're taking out Michigan and Penn State with them along the way. So that's 3 of them, maybe, 10 teams or so that will be in the mix for this, that if the 2 things that need to happen as a baseline happen, then Notre Dame is losing 3 of the teams it's competing with. I think the analog season I'm looking at is 2021, in which, you kind of saw, obviously, no season's a 1-to-1, but I think you can draw the comparison where in 2021 you had, for the first 3 weeks, Notre Dame looks, inconsistent, we'll say. They didn't look great, which is, I think, what you could say this Notre Dame team looked like through the first 4 games, but they didn't look awful either. They had a big win over Wisconsin that kind of showed proof of concept. Then Cincinnati came in, and Cincinnati was a playoff team and beat them at home, and then that team had to do some soul searching. They had a gritty win against Virginia Tech the next week, a good road test, which is what we're going to face this week, and we talk about responding from failure and how you come back after a loss like this. The Notre Dame team in 2021, very nearly kind of got their teeth kicked in against Virginia Tech. And that game nearly ended in a loss, but ultimately they went through 2 quarterbacks, 3 different phases of quarterbacks, and Jonathan Doer hit a long field goal to win, and they gritted it out. And after that, the season kind of fell into place, and they just started ripping off wins and started watching teams ahead of them fall one by one. And eventually ended up in, I believe, the 5th spot in the college football playoff ranking. I think that's how this season is going to go. We'll see how Duke game goes. I think it can go a lot of ways. I think Notre Dame can come out defeated, and I think Duke could take advantage of that. I think Notre Dame can come out motivated and gain a statement win against a top 25 team on the road. We'll see how that goes, but I do think if Notre Dame does, its quote-unquote soul-searching like they did in 2021, and they find themselves on the road in Durham, just like they did in Blacksburg in 2021, I think the rest of the schedule will start to click into place. Obviously, we're not going to, sleep on the fact that USC is going to be a top 5 team. That's not something that the 2021 team had to deal with. Clemson on the road is a tougher test than anything the 2021 team had to deal with. But I think if they come out and beat Duke and they do so with fire, I think you're going to approach the next few weeks with a lot more confidence than you would if they look sloppy against Duke. Because I think there's, like I said, there's 2 ways you can respond to this. And, I believe, I'm trying to remember what year it was that Tebow had the famous, you'll never see a team work harder than after the loss early on in the season. And then that's exactly what they did. They responded, they kept on working, and they ended up, winning national championship. I don't know if this team's going to have a Tebow-esque run to the national title, But there is plenty of evidence to show a team getting kicked in the teeth in a rough loss against a good team and having that motivate them to come out the rest of the year and play their best football. We'll see what that entails for Notre Dame. I think we're going to learn a lot in Durham about the composition of this team mentally and how they want to respond to that. But I think Notre Dame is, if they do come out and respond, like I think most people are expecting them to respond, because this is a veteran team in a lot of elements. They've got a veteran quarterback, they've got leadership in the defense that's well experienced. I think you can expect them to respond well. I don't think that's an unfair expectation. And if that does happen, I think they're going to enter that Lousiville game with a lot of momentum. They'll win that game, and just like that, you're on a 2-game winning streak against 2 good teams heading to USC, and you're playing there at home. The home momentum's going to be back up. Notre Dame needs a lot of stuff to happen around it. They would have made the path a heck of a lot easier if they had just won on Saturday, but it's not a non-existent path.
You're listening to the ShamTalk podcast, the #1 Notre Dame athletics podcast in the world. We appreciate your support, and we're constantly looking for ways to improve the listener experience. In order to do that, we need your help. We have a pretty cool relationship with Amazon.com, and we'd like to invite you to join us. Amazon recently sent us a special link. When you use this link to buy something from Amazon, we receive a small percentage of the order. Best of all, it costs nothing extra for you. The link is available on the screen and in the description below. Once again, before you head to Amazon, start with our link. It doesn't cost you anything extra, and it helps us provide you with the best possible listener experience. Thanks for your support, and let's send it back to the guys.
Duke and then 5 on the volleyball.
Yep. I like that. All right. Let me know when you're ready to come back.
Good to go.
All right. And welcome back to Sham Talk with JJ Post. I'm Tyler Reidy from the second floor of the Duncan Student Center here on the campus of the University of Notre Dame. Talking the upcoming matchup between 11th-ranked Notre Dame football and the 17th-ranked Duke Blue Devils, off to a 4-0 start. And here we go, JJ. We're going to do it all again. College game day for the first time in history is coming to Durham. It's going to be a night game, a second of 4 straight Notre Dame football night games down there in Duke. And you're going to be there. I know you're looking forward to it a lot, the environment down there in Durham.
Yeah, I think the Duke's game is going to be interesting to me because I think people are simultaneously overrating and underrating Duke, or perhaps the best way to put it is people are concerned about the wrong things with Duke. I think a lot of people are seeing, hey, they're 4-0, they're a top 20 team in the polls, they beat Clemson, and that's what's scaring them. And that's not in doubt at all, but I think when you look at Duke's 4-0, you see that they probably should have lost to Clemson, even though they ended up pulling away that game, winning by multiple scores. I think Clemson was the better team for most of that game. I don't think that's a especially hot take to say. Duke obviously destroyed them in the fourth quarter, but for the first 3 quarters, I'd say Clemson played the better game and just shot themselves in the foot repeatedly. And then they've since then beat Lafayette, the active tire fire that is now 1-0 in Big Ten Conference play. That is Northwestern and Connecticut. Some 3 teams that are not exactly powerhouses. So again, I think the 4-0 is impressive, but not exactly the indicator of an elite team. What is indicator of a very good team is the fact that they brought back a ton of talent from a 9-win team last year. That's what concerns me more than anything they've done this year, is the fact that this team won 9 wins last year, and then they brought back a lot of players from that. Continuity is so key in college football, the ability to have your team gel, build experience, build chemistry. They brought back Riley Leonard, who's obviously a top-tier quarterback. You can't say enough about how the job Mike Elko has done, as Duke head coach, and building that program up and, finding consistency, at least from this year to last year, at a program where consistency hasn't really been a strength. It's really impressive. But again, to me, the 4-0 is impressive this year, but it's not the main thing that's going to be a big deal for Duke. It's the fact that they won 9 games last year and brought back so much from that team. And, again, game day is going to be there. The atmosphere is going to be really, really good. I'm interested to see how much Duke, which is obviously a football, obviously a basketball school, comes out for football. The Clemson game by all means looked quite fun. We'll see if that atmosphere gets maybe brought up a little more, because now Notre Dame maybe looks a little vulnerable. I think you kind of in Virginia Tech in 2021, I think you kind of feel maybe that blood in the water type of mentality from the Virginia Tech fans, because Notre Dame is coming off that loss. So I'm interested to see what the crowd is like, and I think because it's a night game, because I do anticipate the crowd will be amped up, it's going to be an environment that's going to be tough to play in. I think those are going to be the factors for Duke, the intangibles, the experience, the crowd on their side, the feeling of, kind of it being a special year for Duke with game day in town. I think those are going to be the factors, as much as, a talented player like Riley Leonard. As much as that is a factor, I think the intangibles are going to be a big deal for this Duke team. And we'll see how much that plays out on the field on Saturday.
Some trends to look for. Duke's 11-0 when scoring first in the Mike Elko era. Notre Dame obviously had to play from behind for the first time on Saturday against Ohio State. Came back but couldn't pull it out in the end. So look for Duke to try and get off to that fast start against a potentially reeling Notre Dame team. But the Irish have an ACC winning streak to extend. Notre Dame has won 29 consecutive games against the Atlantic Coast Conference, extended that win streak to 29 2.5 weeks ago against NC State with the 45-24 victory. So as it stands right now in the middle part of this week, the Irish are the 5.5-point favorite in this one. Seems like most people are riding with an angry, ticked-off Notre Dame team after Ohio State to go down to Duke and take care of business. But I think when you get into the X's and O's of this game, a lot of it's going to come down to who can move the ball better through the air, because both these teams have been really strong against the pass. You look at Notre Dame, #1 defensive completion percentage in the country, 47.2%, and a lot of those numbers were influenced by the poor performance of Brennan Armstrong, completion percentage-wise, in that NC State game. But the Irish at the same time only have 7 sacks so far, so they've had to rely on a lot of good pass coverage. It has been very strong so far this season, but the pass rush has not quite gotten the results. Duke's Riley Leonard, a 68% passer. He's got 6 total touchdowns, and like Sam Hartman, no interceptions to date. So we know Duke can move it through the air very efficiently, if not for huge chunks of yardage and a lot of points. And on the other side, Notre Dame's got Sam Hartman, who's faced Duke twice in his career, 6 touchdowns between those 2 games. But Duke's very good against the pass as well. You look at their pro football focus grades. 92.6 is the grade on their pass coverage. That's elite. 71.8 on their pass rush. That's high quality. And Duke's top 5 nationally in both passing yards allowed per game, 143.3, and points per game, 8.8. Duke has allowed under 10 points per game. We think Notre Dame's defense has been excellent to open up this season. How about what Duke's doing down there? So I think a lot of the question is, we know in large part what Notre Dame is, although the passing game for the Irish looked a little bit differently last week. The shot plays weren't there. Sam Hartman's yards per attempt totals dipped all the way down to 7 last week. They were up in the low double-digit categories through the first 4 weeks of the season. A lot more short yardage throws, especially on third down situations. Notre Dame trying to find receivers like Mitchell Evans, who had a breakout game, settling into those Ohio State zone defenses. But Duke, the question is, can they be multifaceted enough to hang with this Notre Dame defense and hang with a Notre Dame offense that, again, could be ticked off after a 14-point performance and come out and try and set the world on fire? Duke can run the ball very well in addition to the efficient passing. Duke's got over 200 yards per game on the ground, so that's an interesting thing to watch for, how well Duke can adjust throughout the game and get it done on either side of the offensive attack to counter the strong Notre Dame D.
Yeah, and the thing you mentioned, Duke's been good against the passing game, and Notre Dame might be down Jaden Thomas.
Yeah.
It will be down Deion Colsey. This is not especially deep Notre Dame receiver room at the moment. They have, by my count, if Thomas is out, we don't know what his status is going to be. I believe he was officially given as questionable on Monday. But if he is out, that means Notre Dame will have 4 scholarship receivers, 2 of which are freshmen. That's not an ideal setup. Especially going against Mike Elko, who always has some tricks up his sleeve. An excellent defensive mind. Notre Dame fans know that plenty well. And I think if you're Notre Dame, you're going to be quite concerned about how even if Jaden Thomas is there, how you're going to move the ball against this Duke defense. And if Jaden Thomas isn't there, really how much you're going to pass the ball. Period. Because the last thing you want to do if you're Notre Dame is start trying to force the pass when it's not there. You've got a great quarterback in Sam Hartman, but you also have good running backs, and this is a Duke team that Notre Dame needs to. You can't afford to play from behind against. Like you said, Duke is good when they get out in front. They know how to be fundamental. They won't lose this game easily. They will not gift you this game that perhaps some of the other teams in Notre Dame's schedule, if they had fallen behind early, they maybe could count on just out talenting or just waiting for the other team to slip up. You can't do that against Duke. So Notre Dame cannot afford to get overly ambitious in the passing game. And that's going to be something that is of even greater impetus if Jaden Thomas is not active for the game. Now, going to the Duke offense.
Were they overly ambitious last year against a much better secondary?
I don't think so.
The audience doesn't hear me.
I know. So for those wondering, our producer Jake just asked, did Notre Dame get too ambitious last week? And I see the argument, honestly, because I think Notre Dame got, I'll put it this way, I think Notre Dame got ambitious in the wrong ways, perhaps. They tried to be efficient, and they succeeded in being efficient, but this was a game where efficiency wasn't going to win you the day. Or maybe in other scenarios it would, but this was a game where Notre Dame was also consistently shooting itself in the foot. They failed to convert on 4th and short twice. They missed a field goal. Obviously, we all know what happened on the last drive. Efficiency only gets you so far when you're not playing great the rest of the way. And Notre Dame was playing pretty good, I'd say, the rest of the way. They weren't playing great, and you need great to beat Ohio State if you're not going to have the big play. And Notre Dame didn't have a big play against Ohio State. Against Duke, I think I think they're due for a big play. That's the thing. This offense has shown it has big play capabilities, and when you go 60 minutes without one, that means odds are one's coming up eventually. We'll see what form it comes in. Duke's not an opponent that should be underestimated, but again, when you go 60 minutes without a big play on an offense that has shown an ability to generate big plays consistently, that means you're probably getting close to something. Estime is going to find a hole eventually. Hartman's going to hit a deep ball eventually. These are things that you can expect will come with time. Duke's going to have a counterpunch. I think that can be expected between players like Jordan Waters, at least in the rushing game. We talked about Riley Leonard, a very, very quality quarterback. Duke has weapons on offense. They're not going to just sit around and try to do what Notre Dame did against Ohio State last year, just try to make the game a rugby scrum. That's not going to happen. But I think this is going to be a game where Notre Dame will need to, at some point, break it open. We'll see if that comes via running the ball a billion times and establishing the run. We'll see if that comes with letting Hartman sling it deep and open up the game that way. But Notre Dame's going to need to, at some point, kind of crack this game open, and I'm not sure how they're going to do that. But I do think, the one thing Jared Barker has shown an ability to do is kind of look through his options and find the right way to attack a game. And I think that's something that I think we can expect to be a constant. And I don't think that's something that is a mirage. I think against Duke, he is going to look at his options. He's going to see how the run game's doing. He's going to see how the pass game's doing. He's going to find something he likes and then hammer it. And I think against Duke, that is exactly what Notre Dame will do. I don't know if Duke will have an answer to that if they start, say, running the ball really effectively. If they start hitting all these deep shots. I'm not sure. If Notre Dame controls the tempo of the game, I'm not sure how Duke is able to respond. If Duke is able to control the tempo of the game, however, then we're going to have a dogfight on our hands.
Absolutely. Always appreciate our producer, Peanut Gallery, Jake Miller, getting involved. We thank him for his help, as always, with making the show possible this week and every week. Just to wrap it up, the college football talk, some other games to watch on the slate this week. Remember, each of the 4 teams, 7 through 10 in front of Notre Dame, all reside in the Pac-12, at least the Pac-12 as it still exists right now. One of them, 10th-ranked Utah, goes to 19th-ranked Oregon State this weekend. Irish fans, you would think, will be rooting for the Beavers in that one, hoping for the Pac-12 to cannibalize itself.
As always.
We got 8th-ranked USC taking the trip to Colorado. USC, of course, will be the next team to head to South Bend on the 14th of October, and this is Colorado's last stand, if you will, trying to prove that Oregon, that blowout at Autzen Stadium last week, was just an aberration. They can get back to winning football. 22nd-ranked Florida goes to Kentucky in the perennial battle, you would think, for second place in the SEC East behind Georgia. 24th-ranked Kansas at number 3 Texas, one of the 4 top 25 matchups on the slate this week, that one in the Big 12. And then a couple one-loss SEC West teams trying to hold on for dear life. It's 13th-ranked LSU going to 20th-ranked Ole Miss in another one of those top 25 games. But let's get into a top 5 team that is headed to South Bend Wednesday night. Just a disclaimer, anytime you get me and JJ on a show together, we're going to talk some Olympic sports. And this week, it's Notre Dame Volleyball hosting 5th-ranked Lousiville, a team that swept the Irish in both matchups last season when Notre Dame went 10-18, had the rebuilding year. Now Notre Dame is 8-2, welcoming Louisville into Purcell Pavilion Wednesday night. Notre Dame coming off a sweep of its opening conference weekend, came back, survived a 3-2 brawl with Boston College Friday night, then took care of Syracuse pretty easily Sunday afternoon, a 3-0 sweep. Now Louisville comes in, a team fresh off another Final Four appearance, second consecutive. They're the 3-time defending ACC champions. And Louisville, you look at what they lost last year. The ACC Setter of the Year in Claire Chaussee, or rather Player of the Year Claire Chaussee, ACC Setter of the Year in Raquel Lathro, and the ACC Defensive Player of the Year in Amaya Tillman. And here they are. They've just reloaded. They're back to number 5. And this is a big-time test for Notre Dame, a chance to maybe not necessarily come away with a win. That might not be the expectation, but prove how you stack up against this Louisville squad.
Yeah, the best thing about this game for Notre Dame is they're playing with house money. This is a fixture, to borrow a soccer term, that last year Notre Dame was dominated wall-to-wall in. And a game that Notre Dame this year is not expected to win, but I think we can expect improvement. And improvement is, just winning a set. If Notre Dame wins a set, they will have improved on last year, and they will have shown proof of concept that thus far this year, in which they are 8-2, a very positive start given last year, they have taken a step forward. Again, what makes this game great for Notre Dame is there's no real way they can lose. I mean, they can obviously lose it on the scoreboard. But in terms of the moral victories, in terms of the momentum side of things, there isn't really a way Notre Dame can lose this game unless they lose all 3 sets, 25-10. If they can win a set, that means they improved on last year. It means the 8-2 start was legitimate. If they can, really just look competitive for 3 sets, it means that they went toe-to-toe with one of the best teams in the country. Notre Dame is 2-0 in ACC play. That's obviously they're not going to go undefeated in ACC play. I think we can staple that prediction to the wall fairly confidently. But, right now they are, I'd say, firmly in contention for a mid-table finish. And, I think they can maybe raise that ceiling if they look good against a good Louisville team. They can, go in. Right now, I think most people would say, okay, Notre Dame's 8-2. They haven't really beaten anyone, but they've handled their business against the teams they should beat. That's a step up from last year. That's maybe a mid-table finish. If they compete with number 5 Louisville, the record won't change. In fact, it'll get worse, going from 2-0 to 2-1. But they'll have that added air of, hey, they competed with a really good team. Maybe they can steal a few games, and maybe they can end up finishing, in the top 6 or on the fringe of the top 5 per se. We'll see where that goes. But again, it's going to be the Sidney Palazzolo show. That's I think the one downside of this Notre Dame team. I think everyone knows where they want to get the ball, at least in the critical situations. For a fact Louisville's going to have a good game plan for how to contain her. We'll see how Notre Dame responds. I don't think Notre Dame's really played a team thus far that has been able to shut her down. We'll see if Louisville's able to shut her down, but I think at minimum they're going to be the most defensively resilient team Notre Dame has faced. And I'm interested to see how Selena Rockwell and co. kind of respond to that when Palazzolo starts getting shut down, when it becomes clear that teams aren't going to let her just tee off, what their second plan is. Is it going to be more Charity McDowell? Is it going to be more Fiona Schrader maybe? It's going to be more Ava Lange. Who that second option is, I think Lange has been, for the most part, the second option, but it's clear they like McDowell. She's played in every set so far this year. Fiona Schrader's kind of been almost like a change of pace hitter for them. I'm interested to see what their plan B is because they're going to need a plan B.
I had the chance to talk with Sidney Palazzolo and Nicole Drunick, the 2 Impact Irish transfers ahead of this Louisville match. You can check out that piece Wednesday ahead of the Louisville game in The Observer. Really excited about that one, and great to have a chance to get inside the minds of these players in this Notre Dame team ahead of its biggest match of the season so far, its first match against a ranked opponent to this point in 2023. Elsewhere around Irish athletics, the women's soccer team hosts Louisville this Saturday night at Alumni Stadium. The men's soccer team heads back on the road after an emphatic victory over Virginia to take on NC State on Sunday. Should be another fun weekend in Irish sports, JJ.
Absolutely. I mean, it's going to be last weekend was 1 game away from being a perfect
almost
weekend. Volleyball won. Women's soccer won.
Draw.
Men's soccer. Well, they won against Duke, which was kind of the bigger game.
Yes, that's true. Yep.
And then they tied Pittsburgh. Men's soccer won on Friday. St. Mary's won 3 games over the weekend. It was a heck of a weekend for the Tri-Campus community. That's right. This is a Tri-Campus podcast. We don't just cover Notre Dame sports. But then football kind of ruined the entire bit. So once again, we're back on for another big weekend this week. We'll see if it's maybe a little more successful all around. Football can carry their end of the bargain this time. We'll see what happens. But regardless, it should be a fun weekend. And even if football doesn't win, I think we can perhaps more safely count on the likes of soccer.
If you enjoyed this episode and you'd like to help support the podcast, please subscribe and leave a rating and review. To stay up to date with ShamTalk and get all our behind-the-scenes content, you can follow us on Instagram and Twitter at Notre Dame Television. That's all for now. Thanks for listening, and go Irish!